Imagine embarking on a grandiose journey, full of promise and expectation, only to discover that signs have been ignored, forebodings cast aside, and a tragic fate looms. In today's video, we'll explore the Titanic's curse, premonitions we ignore to our own doom. Have you ever felt that chill down your spine, that gut feeling that something is wrong, but you chose not to listen? Like many on board the Titanic, we sometimes put our intuitions aside, only to face the devastating consequences later. Get ready to discover how this blind trust and denial of hunches changed history forever, leaving a painful lesson that still resonates today. So let's start our video journey, but first check if you're already subscribed, and if you're not, don't forget to subscribe, because on this channel I'm going to bring you a series of never-before-seen prophecy content. In 1898, 14 years before the Titanic set sail on its fateful voyage, a little-known writer called Morgan Robertson published a novel that, at first glance, seemed to be just another work of fiction. The book, entitled Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan, told the story of a luxurious transatlantic ship called the Titan, which, on its maiden voyage, collided with an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank, resulting in a devastating loss of life. Up to this point, the story might seem like just a strange coincidence, but the details in the book were so eerily similar to reality that many, after the Titanic sank, began to see it as a premonitory warning, an overlooked omen. Like the Titanic, the Titan was described as the largest ship ever built, equipped with the latest in technology and safety. Both ships were considered unsinkable, a belief that would end up being tragically disproved. Robertson described the Titan as a ship capable of high speeds, designed to compete with the best ships of its time. The Titan, in its race against time and the adversities of the ocean, met its fate on a cold April night when, unable to steer in time, it collided violently with an iceberg. The impact was so devastating that, within hours, the ship disappeared into the depths of the Atlantic, taking most of its passengers and crew with it. The book also mentioned the lack of sufficient lifeboats for everyone on board, a detail that, at the time, was seen as a flaw in Robertson's fiction, but which, tragically, would become a reality in the case of the Titanic. The Titan, like the Titanic, had no boats for all the passengers, a decision that was based on the blind trust that such ships would never face such a disaster. After the Titanic sank, many returned to Robertson's novel, shocked by the similarities. How could anyone have so accurately described what was to become one of the greatest maritime disasters in history? The book, which had gone unnoticed for many years, was given a new lease of life, and the figure of Morgan Robertson was elevated to almost mythical status. Some speculated that he had some kind of clairvoyance, while others believed it was just a spooky coincidence. Whatever the explanation, Futility, or the Wreck of the Titan has become a symbol of premonitions ignored, a reminder that sometimes the signs of disaster are right in front of us, but confidence in our own invulnerability prevents us from seeing them. Robertson's literary warning, although not heeded in time, remains as a somber echo of the Titanic tragedy, a tragedy that could have been avoided if the lessons of fiction had been taken to heart. In the spring of 1912, as the Titanic prepared for its maiden voyage, many of those who boarded that majestic vessel felt a mixture of excitement and pride. After all, they were about to cross the Atlantic aboard the largest and most luxurious ship ever built. However, amid the laughter and glamour, there was also an atmosphere of unease that crept discreetly among the passengers and crew. This feeling, which is difficult to describe, manifested itself in disturbing dreams and strange forebodings which, for some, seemed to be a warning that something terrible was about to happen. One such story involves a young first-class passenger named Jessie W. Leach. Even before boarding the Titanic, Jessie had a recurring and terrifying dream. She saw herself adrift at sea, surrounded by darkness and cold, as a gigantic ship tilted and disappeared beneath the icy waters. This dream left her with a constant sense that something was wrong. On the morning of the voyage, she almost decided not to board, feeling an inexplicable fear that only grew as the ship pulled away from port. Although Jessie continued on, the dream never left her, and on that fateful night, her premonitions came true. Another passenger, a businessman named William T. Stead, was known for his interest in spirituality and the power of premonitions. The night before boarding, Stead had a strange dream in which he saw himself struggling for survival in frigid waters, surrounded by wreckage from a ship. He shared this dream with friends and colleagues, expressing a growing concern about the voyage. Stead decided to board anyway, perhaps relying too much on the Titanic's unsinkable reputation. His hunch, however, was yet another unheeded warning that would end in tragedy. It was not just the passengers who experienced these unsettling signs. Some crew members also reported feelings of unease and fear before setting sail. Frederick Fleet, one of the lookouts responsible for spotting obstacles ahead of the ship, confessed to colleagues that he had felt a strange tension since boarding. Fleet, who would later be the first to spot the iceberg, described it as feeling as if something invisible was watching the Titanic's every move, waiting for the right moment to act. On the night of the sinking, as many were preparing for bed, an eerie silence hung over the ship. Some passengers reported waking suddenly, for no apparent reason, with their hearts racing and a sense of imminent danger. Among them was young Edith Russell, who was overcome by irrational fear and spent much of the night wandering the corridors, unable to find peace in her cabin. Her anxiety was so strong that she almost went up on deck to ask the captain to stop the ship, but reason held her back. She would never know how crucial that impulse could have been. These dreams and premonitions, shared by several people on board, created a mosaic of warnings that, unfortunately, were dismissed or underestimated. In an age when reason and science prevailed, trusting in intuition seemed irrational, almost superstitious. However, after the tragedy, these reports took on new meaning, being seen as clear signs of an impending disaster that everyone, for various reasons, chose to ignore. The Titanic sank on that cold April night, but the premonitions of those on board remain as a haunting testament to the fact that, no matter how much we try to rationalize and explain the world around us, there are invisible and inexplicable forces that sometimes try to warn us of danger. The story of the Titanic reminds us that, amidst our confidence and pride, we must also listen to our instincts and heed those small voices that warn us of what is to come. On the night of April 14, 1912, the Titanic sailed majestically through the icy waters of the North Atlantic, boasting the title of the largest and most luxurious ship ever built. On board, its passengers enjoyed the comfort and glamour that only the unsinkable Titanic could provide. But while the lights shone in the ballrooms and the passengers danced to the sounds of the orchestra, the sea around them held secrets and unseen dangers, ready to turn this dream voyage into a nightmare. As the Titanic headed towards New York, several radio messages were received warning of the presence of icebergs nearby. Ships sailing on the same route sent urgent warnings, reporting large blocks of ice drifting dangerously close to the Titanic's path. However, on a ship where reliance on technology was absolute, these warnings were not taken with the seriousness they deserved. The Titanic's commander, Captain Edward Smith, an experienced and respected sailor, received several of these messages throughout the afternoon and evening. He knew that the Titanic was entering a dangerous zone, but he believed that the ship's speed and robustness would be sufficient to deal with any eventuality. In addition, the pressure to reach New York in the shortest possible time was enormous. After all, a record crossing would be the icing on the cake for the maiden voyage of this magnificent ocean liner. So, instead of reducing speed, as prudence demanded, the Titanic continued its journey at full throttle, cutting through the dark waters at an impressive speed. Captain Smith decided to keep going, trusting in the ship's maneuverability and the ability of his lookouts to spot any danger in time. It was a decision that, in retrospect, would seal the fate of everyone on board. At 11:40 p.m., reality set in brutally. A colossal iceberg appeared out of nowhere, ahead of the Titanic. Frederick Fleet, the lookout on duty, was the first to spot it and, with his heart racing, sounded the alarm. "Iceberg ahead," he shouted. But by then, it was too late. The Titanic, moving at such high speed, was unable to steer in time. The engines were quickly activated to reverse, but the immense ship, with all its mass and inertia, did not have the agility necessary to avoid the impact. The sound of ice tearing through the hull echoed throughout the ship, and within minutes, what was considered impossible began to happen. Water flooded the compartments, and the Titanic began to sink. The ship, designed to withstand almost anything, was brutally defeated by nature, not because it was not strong or advanced, but because the decisions made that night did not take into account the necessary respect for the sea and its dangers. The tragedy of the Titanic was compounded by a series of other fatal decisions. Even after the collision, many on board did not believe that the ship could actually sink. The orders to evacuate were given late, and when the lifeboats began to be launched, many left with less than half their capacity, as passengers hesitated to leave the comfort of the ship to face the relentless cold of the Atlantic. The Titanic disaster teaches us that overconfidence can be as dangerous as the threat itself. Ignoring the signs of danger, whether out of pride, pressure, or simple carelessness, can lead to irreversible consequences. That night, the icy waters of the Atlantic exacted a heavy price for the hubris and fatal decisions that were made. The sinking of the Titanic was not just the result of an accident, it was the tragic outcome of a series of choices that, if different, could have saved hundreds of lives. The sinking of the Titanic, which occurred on the freezing night of April 15, 1912, was not just a maritime disaster, it was an event that profoundly shook the world, leaving an indelible mark on history. The tragedy brutally revealed the flaws of human hubris, where unwavering trust in technology and the supposed invulnerability of the ship led to the deaths of more than 1,500 people. But beyond the grief and pain, the sinking of the Titanic also brought with it powerful lessons that forever changed the way we sail and how we approach maritime safety. Soon after the tragedy, the world began to realize that blind trust in technology, without taking into account the dangers of the sea and human limitations, was a fatal mistake. The Titanic, billed as the unsinkable ship, showed that even the greatest human achievements are not immune to the forces of nature. This bitterly learned lesson led to a revolution in maritime safety standards and regulations, ensuring that the loss of life on the Titanic was not in vain. One of the most significant changes to result from the sinking was the rethinking of lifeboat regulations. Before the Titanic, ships were equipped with only enough lifeboats to accommodate a fraction of the passengers, based on the assumption that time would permit rescue of other ships before a complete disaster occurred. The Titanic, for example, carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for about half of the people on board, but even these few lifeboats were launched below capacity due to lack of proper training and the panic that ensued. Following the disaster, new regulations were implemented requiring all ships to have enough lifeboats to accommodate every person on board, regardless of the size or technology of the ship. In addition to lifeboats, the sinking of the Titanic also highlighted the need for drastic improvements in maritime communications. During the Titanic's voyage, the radio system, a relatively new technology at the time, was not in continuous operation, which resulted in critical warning messages about icebergs ahead being missed. Following the tragedy, 24-hour radio monitoring was instituted on all ships, a measure that ensured that distress messages were always received and responded to in a timely manner. Another direct consequence of the disaster was the creation of the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SALAS, in 1914, which remains the cornerstone of maritime safety regulations today. SALAS established rigorous standards for ship construction, crew training, emergency drills, and monitoring of shipping routes, with the aim of preventing a tragedy like the Titanic from happening again. The cultural impact of the sinking cannot be underestimated either. The Titanic has become a symbol of human frailty in the face of nature, and its story continues to fascinate and teach generations. Films, books, documentaries, and exhibitions have kept the memory of the Titanic alive, not just as a tragedy, but as a constant reminder of the lessons it taught us. The story of the Titanic is told and retold, not only for its epic drama, but for the hard-won lessons that changed the course of maritime history. Ultimately, the Titanic taught us that no matter how advanced technology is, caution, respect for the elements, and adequate preparation are key to avoiding tragedies. The Titanic tragedy, with all its bitter lessons, became a watershed moment, transforming norms and mindsets, and ensuring that even amid innovation and progress, we never forget the dangers that can still lurk in the depths of the sea. Today, as we sail the oceans, the lessons of the Titanic still resonate, reminding us that we must always be vigilant and prepared. The story of the Titanic, though tragic, is a powerful lesson in humility and caution, a reminder that no matter how far we advance, we must never underestimate nature and the risks it can impose on us. The Titanic tragedy left us with more than a sad story. It taught us valuable lessons that continue to shape our understanding of safety, humility, and the unpredictable nature of the world we live in. As we reflect on this event, we are reminded that even in the face of our greatest technological triumphs, we must always respect the forces of nature and never underestimate the power of the unexpected. If you enjoyed this video and want to explore more fascinating stories and their lessons, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts or other stories you would like to see here. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing interesting and engaging content. Until next time.